Alright, so I'm back with another video. So this is the second part in the Jobava January series. And here it is. It's another game with the Jobava London. Just played today. I was playing 2100. This game, instead of a 10-minute flat game, this is a 15 plus 10 game, however. So a little bit longer, a little bit more serious. And I delivered in this game with some pretty precise play and a nice attack at the end. So let's take a look. So start the game off d4, d5, knight c3, knight f6. All standard stuff here. Bishop f4, the characteristic Jobava London is on the board just in time for Jobava January. And he goes c6 here. So this is a way of playing. The idea being he does stop my knight from coming to b5. However, in playing pawn to c6, he's not really looking to play c5. So he's got a different type of position. So he's probably going to look to break with e5 instead. And in the game, he chooses to fianchetto his bishop, which makes some sense. So I go e3 here, g6. And after g6, I've decided I want to go play h4, h5. So there are some lines where that is in this line, I'd say it's a reasonable plan, and it really forces him to decide whether or not he wants to play h5, or if he wants to just play bishop g7 and allow h5 at some point at the right time. Sometimes exchange sacrifice can happen, and they're sometimes favorable for white. So he goes h5 here and just shuts that down altogether, which is pretty reasonable. I go knight f3, and after bishop to g4, the move that I had seen before is queen to d2. So we're still generally in theory here. And generally, I would say the plan that I've seen is that black tries to take on f3 often and double my pawns, and then I try and castle queenside. However, in this game, he chooses to play bishop to g7. And this felt a little strange to me because I feel like if he's not going to double my pawns here, my knight can jump to e5, and I just do that right away. So this makes a lot of sense. I'm moving my knight away. He can no longer double my pawns. I'm also hitting his bishop, so I'm threatening to gain the bishop pair if I want to do that. And I can also do stuff like f3 and either g4 or e4, which is favorable for me. So he goes knight d7, and I just opt to take the material. The bishop pair. And then I play f3. And so the one thing that I do have to be a little bit concerned about here is e5 is a possibility. And he chooses not to play it here. It certainly would have been interesting if he had gone for this. The idea being either I have to play bishop g5 or I have to take on e5, because it's really hard to tell if I want to play f takes g4 or not. It's just something to consider, but I think this would have given him more play and opened more lines to his advantage. However, he just retreats the knight back to h6, which turns out to be a big problem for him. After castle queenside, he tries to break open with e5 here, and after d takes e5, knight takes e5, I simply choose to play king to b1. So my idea is that I'm going to play e4 next. And the main idea is if he castles kingside here, e4 comes with a whole new threat. So let's say he plays castle kingside. This would be a very bad move due to e4. And now not only is this knight hit on h6, but d5 is hit. But this is the main thing that he has to worry about, this knight. So he would have to play something like king h7, and then I can take on d5. So that would be winning material for me. Maybe he can try something like d4, but it seems a little bit sketchy. And at the very least, I can probably just get away with playing queen takes d4. Anyway, so he doesn't castle in the game here. He goes queen to b6, which makes some sense. However, I would think maybe queen a5 is better, but I don't think those are really the main moves to think about. I think knight to f5 really makes the most sense because if you don't play your knight into the game now, I'm going to go e4, and this knight is never going to get into the game. Notice all these squares are covered, and it's very hard to get that knight in the game. So he goes queen b6, I go e4, and it's important to note his knight is boxed out, but he also can't castle now because I'll take it. So he's got a whole new problem where his king is stuck in the center, and castling queenside looks sketchy also. However, it might be something to consider because his position is looking a little bit drastic. So he goes d4 here, just trying to open lines, I guess. However, I choose not to play queen takes d4. There were some lines that I was a little bit unsure about here, where after rook takes d4, he has knight takes f3, hitting my rook, and I just felt like this wasn't necessarily the best that I had in this position. So I choose to play knight to a4, hit his queen. It forces his queen to go back. Notice all of these squares are hit and defended, so he can't stay out over here. So he has to retreat the queen. He goes all the way back to d8. And here I choose to play a nice maneuver. I go knight to c5. I'm going to attack this pawn, and I'm also going to retreat the knight and go win this pawn with my knight instead. And that's what happens in the game. And he tries to play c5 to defend the pawn. However, this weakens these light squares around his king, or on this diagonal particularly. So my bishop jumps right in, bishop b5 check, and then he goes king f8. So his position is a little bit sketchy here, and I just go c3, and my main point is I'm just going to take advantage of this pin. And the point is I'm going to win a pawn, because he's got serious issues in this position. These pieces are all terrible. They're kind of in a box. His queen is or this pawn is pinned, so he's in this nasty pin down the d file. I've got a lot of pressure going in all directions. His king is unsafe. This is more or less just winning for me here. And he tries king g8 here. And, you know, I didn't see any knockout, so I just choose to take on d4 here. And after c takes d4, I just take with the knight. And simply put, I'm much better here. I'm up a pawn now, and I still have a lot of pressure in this position. And his pieces, I mean, how do you get this knight into the game? Can't go here, can't go here. Your king's blocking g8, your pawn's blocking f7. You can't really move your f-pawn, because then you're allowing all kinds of stuff on this diagonal potentially. So it's really difficult here for him. So he goes king h7. Maybe he is going to bring a rook into the game somehow. Maybe he's going to reposition his knight. It's not really clear. So I go g4. And my plan is I'm just going to rip open the king side and attack him now, because his pieces aren't necessarily ready to defend. So he takes on g4, and I just go h5. I'm just going to rip open this H file if he allows me. And he doesn't want to do that, so he tries to keep things closed with g5. However, I just go bishop takes g5. And then after f6, I just drop my bishop back. And yeah, he's got some pressure with this pawn, but I'm not too worried about it. So he goes g takes f3. And, you know, he really doesn't have a whole lot brewing here. So I just go rook g1. I'm just going to focus my pieces towards his king, and I'm just going to try and attack him. So he goes knight g4. And looking back on it, I should probably play e5 to just open this diagonal up right away, if he allows it. But I go queen c2, and the idea is I'm just going to x-ray his king and threaten pawn to e5. And so he goes rook to c8, attack my queen, so that if I go e5, check, he's going to take my queen. So I play knight to c6. Not only am I blocking his attack on my queen, but I'm also attacking his queen two ways, and I'm still threatening e5 with this check. So he goes queen to f8, and this is, it's a pretty good defensive move, because after e5, he goes f5 to block this diagonal. And so I applaud my opponent for putting up such good resistance here, because he made winning this position quite difficult. So I take on h6 here, and this is a pretty forcing move. And after knight takes h6, note how bishop takes h6 is no good because of rook takes g4 exploiting this pin. So that would be no good for him. So he has to play knight takes h6. And then after rook to d7, I'm really just putting the pressure on him here. And, you know, it's hard to suggest what to do here. He goes rook g8. And I wasn't really sure like uh, if I have any knockout sacrifice, so I just play bishop, or I play rook to g6. And I'm kind of just infiltrating. I'm lending some support to this knight so I can play bishop to c4. I'm also lining up potential sacrifices on h6 at the right time. Um, but I'm really just like putting him in a bind here. And he goes king h8, and I just go bishop to c4. And the idea of this is after he goes king h8, now his rook is trapped. So he tries to play f2 and create some counterplay, but I simply just take with the queen. And he goes f4, and the idea here is he wants to play queen f5 check and take my rook. However, I'm not really too concerned about that, and I just play bishop takes g8. I just take his rook there, so he gives a check. I block with my queen, and he takes my rook. So if we're taking stock of material here, I'm still up a pawn, but there's a lot of stuff going on in this position. And one of the key things I want to draw your attention to is how his queen is currently defending against rook takes h6. So in this position, if I were to play rook takes h6 and bishop takes h6, queen h7 would not be mate because of queen takes h7. However, I try and bait his queen off of the 7th rank with my next move. Rook d6 is the clearest move and the most winning move, but after my next move, e6, I try and bait him to play queen takes c6 because, it looks like after e6, my rook is no longer defending my knight. He can play queen takes c6 now. However, it is more precise to play either queen b7 or queen c7 to keep this lateral defense, because after what he plays in the game, queen takes c6, a brutal sequence of moves, including 2 brilliant moves according to the chess.com game review. The first of the moves is rook takes h6 check. So this is a brilliant move. Idea being, if bishop takes h6, queen h7 is mate. And if king takes g8, I give a check on h7, king f8, and then another brilliant move, rook f6 check. E7 check also works, but rook f6 check is more precise. Idea being, if bishop takes f6, queen f7 is mate due to this pawn on e6. And if he moves to e8, I'm going to check him and then take on g7. It's important to make all your moves with check because he's threatening mate down the c file. If I'm not mating him in this position, I'm going to be losing, or if I'm not winning mass material too. So he plays king here, and I just take here with check. And then after king to d6, e7 check with the skewer on the queen, and that's going to be the ball game. So after the trade, I just go queen f8, threaten to queen, and after rook to c8, I simply just chop off his rook, and then I queen. And then after a few more moves, we have a checkmate on a3. So I thought this was a pretty instructive game, very accurate game, roughly 90% accuracy according to the chess.com eval. It was a pretty good game, nice attack, and I thought my opponent put a fantastic resistance because he had a very tough position throughout the game. And fortunately, I was able to find that nice sequence of moves here at the end with rook takes h6 here, and then rook f6. So a couple nice rook sacrifice moves that led to a decisive win of material and then the game. So I thought this was a pretty good game. Nice second game for Jobava January, and my rating is looking pretty nice right now, 2130 rapid on chess.com, and hopefully that can continue to get better. I got my eyes set on 2200, and I'll see you guys next time.